Hey guys, I'm T and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, we make trendy and fun crochet tutorials twice a week, and if you haven't already, smash that like button, drop a comment down below, and subscribe to join in on the fun. For today's tutorial, we've got a fun one, a mock neck bralette. I've been really feeling cutouts in interesting non-conventional shapes lately, which led to a lovely make, a modern bralette that's sure to get a few gasps and a head turn. Speaking of, if you're down to make a few heads turn with your crochet wearables, you are in the right place. We have hundreds of modern crochet tutorials and patterns with even more dropping twice weekly, so consider clicking the bell to subscribe and you'll never miss an upload. Also, do me a huge favor and give this video a big thumbs up if you like it, or 2 thumbs down if you don't. Either way, it's a great way to show support so I can keep putting out free tutorials every Wednesday and Sunday. Now it's time to get on the show, so without further ado, for this project, any category 4 yarn will work, but I used a total of 125 grams of yarn, and that's 170 yards if you're stateside. As for tools, a 5mm hook, scissors, stitch markers, and a tape measure. There is a written pattern down below. Use offer code TCDDIY for a discount off any $9.99 plus order, and enter this week's pattern giveaway by telling us the next thing you have on your crochet to-do list. I actually don't have an idea what we're going to make next, but we definitely have a long list. Details for the giveaway down below. We're using 3 stitches for this project, and they'll be as follows. Chain, slip stitch, single crochet, half double crochet. This tutorial is made for a size small, but you can adjust it for your size, and we explain how to in the video, so let's get started. Getting this top started, we're all going to grab our category 4 yarn and make a slip knot. Then we're all going to grab our 5mm hook and start off by making a chain that starts 2 inches underneath our underarm, right to where our underbust is, so roughly where an underwire would lay. Now I need roughly 4 inches or 10 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain 15. Now that we have our chain, we're all going to do our first row, which is a half double crochet row. Block off that last chain and do a chain 2. That chain 2 doesn't count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. Then we're going to yarn over, preparing for a half double crochet, and into that chain that we blocked off, or the 3rd chain from our hook, insert with a half double. So insert, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through all 3. Continue with 1 half double crochet into every chain, leaving the last one. We've put 1 half double crochet into every chain, leaving the last one. Into that last chain, we're all going to do an increase of 2 half double crochets. So all that's going to be is 1 half double crochet into that last chain, and also a 2nd half double crochet. Our following row is going to be a back loop slip stitch row. So chain 1, that chain 1 doesn't count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. Flip our work, and put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. So we're going to start by finding that last stitch from our previous row. Insert your hook in through that back loop. When we have these 2 loops, we're going to yarn over and gently pull through both loops on our hook. Be sure not to pull too tightly, otherwise the following row will be too tight to work into. Again, into that next stitch, insert in through that back loop, or the loop that's furthest away from us, yarn over, pull through everything on our hook. Continue with 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. We are at the end of our row 2. Our row repeat is going to be a back loop half double and back loop slip stitch row. So getting started on the following row, chain 2 and flip. Put 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch. So yarn over, into that first stitch's back loop, or the loop that's furthest away from us, insert, pull through, yarn over, pull through all 3. Continue with 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch, leaving the last one. 1 back loop half double crochet has been worked into every stitch, leaving the last one. Now we're all going to do an increase of 2 back loop half doubles. Yarn over, into that last stitch's back loop, insert with 1 half double, into that same back loop with a 2nd half double crochet. From here, it is going to be a repeat of our 2 previous rows. So a back loop slip stitch row with no increases and no decreases, and a back loop half double crochet row that ends on an increase of 2. Continue to repeat these 2 rows until we have a portion that can stretch, remembering that this does have a decent amount of stretch to it, from mid-underarm over to the corner of our underarm. I'll meet you back right after a slip stitch row. The first half of our underarm is completed. We have a total of 4 rows, and my width is roughly 1.5 inches or 4 centimeters unstretched. Now we have just a few more underarm rows to do. So we're going to chain 2, flip our work. Since we're all along the bottom, put 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch, leaving the last one. At the end of our back loop half double crochet row, we're now going to do an increase of 3 back loop half doubles. Yarn over. Into that last stitch's back loop, insert with 1, same back loop with 2, same back loop with 3, half double crochets all into that last back loop. For this portion, we are going to need to increase into our slip stitch row as well. So start that with a chain 2. That first chain will count as a stitch for the following row. That second chain is our turning chain, and flip our work. Starting with the second chain from our hook, insert with a back loop slip. So into that second chain's back loop, yarn over, and still gently pull through everything on our hook. From here, continue with 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. From here, continue to repeat our 2 previous rows. A back loop half double crochet row that ends on an increase of 3, and a back loop slip stitch row that starts with an increase as well, until we now have a portion that can stretch from mid-underarm over to the front of our body. So roughly where a bra strap or a tank top strap would be, but we want to make sure that this ends where the inside of the bra strap or a tank top strap would be, because we are going to have a thick strap as well. And I will meet you back right after we complete a slip stitch row. We are back. I have just completed the entirety of my underarm portion. I have a total of 12 rows, and this width is roughly 3 inches or 8 centimeters unstretched. Now what we're going to do from here is get started on the first bit of the decrease portion for our neckline. So what we're going to do is start by inserting our stitch marker into the second stitch from the top. That is going to be the same for every size. Then chain 2 and put 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch, leaving 3 stitches right before a stitch marker. We've put 1 back loop half double into every stitch, leaving 3 stitches right before a stitch marker. Now we're going to do a decrease of 3 back loop halves. Yarn over, into that third to last back loop, pull through. Second to last back loop, pull through, last back loop, pull through for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 loops on our hook. Then yarn over, pull through all 5. Our first row for our neckline is complete. From here, chain 1 and flip our work. This row is going to start with a decrease of 2 back loop slip stitches. So insert your hook into that first stitch's back loop, pull through. Next stitch's back loop, then yarn over and gently pull through all 3 loops. And that's it. Put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. The first 2 rows for our neckline are complete. Now we're only going to do a decrease of 3 at the end of our first half double crochet row. The rest of our rows are going to end with a decrease of 2, just to get a smoother curve when it gets to the middle of the body. So as a refresher, chain 2, flip our work. Put 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch, leaving the last 2 stitches. We've now put 1 back loop half into every stitch, leaving the last 2 stitches. Now we're going to do a decrease of 2 back loop halves. So yarn over, into that second to last back loop, pull through, last back loop, pull through for 4 loops on our hook. Yarn over, pull through all 4. From here, we're going to continue to repeat our 2 previous rows. So that is a back loop slip stitch row that starts with a decrease of 2, then a back loop half double crochet row that ends on a decrease of 2, until we now have a portion that can stretch from mid underarm over to mid chest. Then I'll meet you back right after a half double crochet row. We are back. I have just completed the first half of my piece. The decrease portion for my neckline is complete, and now I have a total of 21 rows. My width is roughly 5.5 inches or 14 centimeters unstretched. And now we're going to do our middle row, which is just a back loop slip stitch row with no increases and no decreases. Then we can automatically get started on the other side of our neckline. So at the end of that middle row, chain 2, flip our work. Put 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch, leaving the last one, and then I'll meet you back. So our middle back loop slip stitch row is complete. Our following back loop half double crochet row is nearly complete. We should all have 1 stitch left. Into that last stitch, we're going to do an increase of 2 back loop half double crochets. So insert with 1 back loop half into that same stitch with a second back loop half double crochet, because we need this side to mirror everything on this side of our middle row. We do need to increase into our slip stitch row as well. So just like how we did for the underarm, we're going to chain 2. That first chain is going to count as a stitch for the following row. That second chain is our turning chain, and flip our work. Start by inserting our hook into that second chain from our hook's back loop. So insert with a back loop slip stitch. From here, continue with 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. From here, we're going to continue to repeat these 2 previous rows. So a back loop half double crochet row that ends on an increase of 2, and a back loop slip stitch row that starts with an increase for the same amount of rows that we have for this side of our neckline, not including that middle row. And we do need to keep in mind that that last half double crochet row that we're going to do is going to end on an increase of 3 back loop half doubles, because on this side we started it with a decrease of 3. But when I meet you back, I will remind you of that. Go ahead and get these rows completed, and I'll meet you back. We are back. We have just completed the increase half of our neckline, remembering that our last row, which should be a half double crochet for everyone, will end with an increase of 3 back loop half double crochets. So all that is 1, 2, 3 half double crochets into that last back loop. Then once we have this completed, we're all going to do a chain 2 because we skipped a total of 2 stitches on this side. So here's 1, here's 2. Then from here, we're going to block off that second chain and do a chain 1. That chain 1 doesn't count as a stitch. That's our turning chain, and we're going to flip our work. Now we're going to start off this row with a decrease of 2 back loop slip stitches. So starting with the second chain from our hook, we're going to insert into that back loop, pull through into that following chain, insert, and gently pull through all 3 loops on our hook. And from here, continue with 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. Then at the end of the row, we're all going to chain 2, flip our work. Put 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch, leaving the last 3, and then I'll meet you back. So we've made our way back up with our back loop half double crochet row, leaving the last 3 stitches. Now we're going to do a decrease of 3 back loop halves. So yarn over into that third to last back loop, pull through, second to last, pull through, and last, pull through for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 loops on our hook, then yarn over, pull through all 5. From here, it's going to be a repeat of our 2 previous rows. So a back loop slip stitch row that starts with a decrease of 2 back loop slips, and a back loop half double crochet row that ends on a decrease of 3 for the same amount of rows that we have for the second half of the underarm portion together. And just like how we did to this last underarm row right over here, I'm going to insert a stitch marker into the top of this back loop slip stitch row as well. So the first half of my underarm is complete. Now I have a total of roughly 9.5 inches or 24 centimeters. Now we're going to finish up with our second half together. So that's going to start with a slip stitch row with no increases and no decreases. So put 1 back loop slip into every stitch. At the end of that row, chain 2, flip our work, put 1 back loop half into every stitch, leaving the last 2 stitches, and I'll meet you back. Our back loop slip stitch row with no increases and no decreases is completed, and our following back loop half double crochet row is nearly completed. We left the last 2 stitches. Now all together, we're going to yarn over into that second to last back loop, pull through, into that last back loop, pull through for 4 loops on our hook, then yarn over, pull through all 4. From here, we're going to continue to repeat our 2 previous rows. So a back loop slip stitch row with no increases and no decreases, and a back loop half double crochet row that ends on a decrease of 2 for the same amount of rows as the first half of our underarm portion that we did together. Once we have the same amount of rows, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and I'll meet you back. We are back. I have just completed the entirety of my front panel. I have roughly 10.5 inches or 27 centimeters unstretched. Now from here, we're going to get started on our back panel, which is going to be done pretty much the same way as the front, but without the decreases and increases for our neckline. I actually already have mine all finished up, so I'm going to talk you guys through it. We're all going to start by making a chain for the same amount of chains that we did when we got started on the front panel. Then we're going to do the same exact underarm portion for the same amount of rows. Then when it comes to doing the width of the back panel, we're just going to be doing back loop half double and back loop slip stitch rows with no increases and no decreases. And as a really quick tip for the front panel, we did skip the first 2 stitches. When it came to doing the first row for our neckline, we are not going to be skipping any stitches for the back panel. So once we have the last underarm row, just work straight across with back loop halves and back loop slip stitches for the same amount of rows that we have from the first neckline row all the way across to the last neckline row. Then the underarm is going to be done exactly the same way as the one that we just finished up together, and we do want to make sure that we're inserting our stitch markers into the same side rows as the front panel. Once we have both of these completed, I will meet you back so we can seam it up together. So now that both our front and back panel are completed, we're then going to seam the sides. So start by placing the front panel on top of the back panel, making sure that the ribbing is faced along the outside. We're then going to insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through and do a chain up of 1 to secure. And now from here we're going to do an outside loop slip stitch seam. So start by finding that first stitch into the front panel and insert only in through that front loop. Find that first stitch into the back panel, insert only into that back loop, then yarn over, pull through all 3. Again, next stitch into the front panel, insert into the front loop, next stitch into the back panel, insert into the back loop, yarn over, pull through all 3, and that's it. Continue this until we don't have any more stitches left. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then repeat on the other side. So we are back. We have just completed seaming everything together, and now we're going to get started on our straps. So first we're going to need to prep for that. We're going to make sure that our work is flipped right side out, right side up, and we're going to look at our armhole detail, so right where that side seam is. And all we're going to do is do a single crochet row from the front panel down and then up to the back panel. So we're going to start by inserting our hook into the first side row that we have that's nearest to our side slip stitch row with the stitch marker into it. So into that next half double crochet row, I've inserted my hook into there. We're going to insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through, and do a chain up of 1 to secure. That chain 1 doesn't count as a stitch. Now what we're going to do from here is put 2 single crochets into every side half double, 1 single crochet into every side slip until we reach our side seam. So finding our first side row, which is the side half double, find that top loop and insert, starting with just 1 single crochet. But since this is a side half double, it is a little bit wider, we're going to be inserting another single crochet into that same top loop. So into that same top loop that our previous single crochet is into, a second single crochet. Then into this side row, which is a side slip stitch row, find that top loop and insert with just 1 single crochet. Again, into that next side row, which is a side half double, find that top loop and insert with 2 singles. There's 1. Same top loop with a second. Following top loop was our side slip stitch row. Insert into there with just 1 single. Continue on with this until we're worked into our last side half double crochet row right before our side seam. So we've made our way all the way down with our single crochets until we have reached our side seam. All we're going to do is single crochet into that top stitch that we have for our side seam. So all we're going to do is find that last stitch into our side seam and insert with just 1 single crochet. And we do want to make sure that we're inserting a stitch marker into that stitch. And from here, continue with 2 singles into every side half double, 1 single crochet into every side slip, making our way all the way up. Everyone's last stitch should be that side half double right before our stitch marker, side slip stitch row, and do a chain up of 1 and cut. We are back. So our single crochet row is complete. Now what we're all going to do from here is make a chain the height that we'd like for our straps to be. Now this chain is going to be the height for our underarm strap and also the width of our strap as well. So we're going to start by inserting our hook into that stitch marker stitch that we had into the middle of that single crochet prep row. Then we're going to make our chain. That chain for me is going to be just about 1 inch or 2 centimeters. So I'm going to start by making a chain 5. Now that we have our chain, block off that last chain and do a chain 1. That chain 1 doesn't count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. Then into that chain that we blocked off, the second chain from our hook, we're going to insert, yarn over, and gently pull through everything on our hook. Then continue with 1 slip stitch into every chain. Now that we've put 1 slip stitch into every chain, we're going to need to connect it into the base. So finding that next available stitch into the base, we're going to insert with a slip stitch. Now that slip stitch into the base doesn't actually count as a stitch. That's just to connect. Then to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that next available stitch into the base, flip our work, and put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. So finding that first stitch from our previous row, not any of those slip stitches into the base, we're going to insert into that back loop, yarn over, pull through everything on our hook, and that's it. From here, continue with 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. At the end of the row, chain 1, flip our work, put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, and I'll meet you back at the base. We've put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, did a chain 1, flipped our work, and made our way back down. Now we're going to connect it into the base. So finding that next available stitch into the base, insert with a slip stitch to connect that row. Then since we're here, we might as well work our way up to the following row. So slip stitch into that next stitch into the base, flip our work and put one back loop slip into every stitch. We're going to continue doing this, making our way all the way up until we reach our last stitch, and then I will meet you back so I can show you guys how we're going to work straight into our strap. We are back. We've just made our way up until we have worked into our last single crochet. Now from here, we're just going to chain one, doesn't matter what side we ended on, flip our work, and then put one back loop slip stitch into every stitch. Then just continue to repeat that slip stitch row, no increases, no decreases, until we have a portion that can reach over to the middle of the base of our neck. Then once we have that, do a chain up and a cut, and we're going to repeat on the other side, but I'll meet you guys back just to show you how we're going to get that one started. But just as a really quick tip, we want to make sure that once when we are putting this up to ourselves, we want to make sure that we're stretching the strap as far as it can because it will have a decent amount of stretch to it as well. Once we have that completed, I'll meet you back. We are back. One of my straps is completed. I have a total of 34 rows, and that's roughly 3.5 inches or 9 centimeters unstretched. Now what we're going to do from here is basically the same thing on the other side, but without the chain since we already have this base already here. So all we're going to do is just insert our hook into this top corner stitch, and then just start repeating, if I can find the top corner stitch, and then just start repeating with our back loop slip stitch rows all the way down. Then we're just going to connect it into the base the same way that we've been doing. Then we're going to do the same amount of total rows as this side over here. Once we have the same thing, we're going to repeat the same thing that we just did here on the other side, and then I'll meet you back. So we are back. I have just completed the straps on both sides, and now we're going to get started on our neckline. So first things first, let's make sure that our work is flipped right side out, right side up. Then we're going to be inserting our hook into the outside corner stitch of our back panel strap, and we're going to start with a chain that reaches over our shoulder to our front strap. So as a really quick tip, when it comes to placing our straps, that is going to be completely up to you. Your front panel straps can either be closer to each other or further apart. That is a you decision. I would like for mine to be a little bit closer, so my back panel chain is going to be just a little bit longer. So I needed roughly 5 inches or 13 centimeters, so I went ahead and made a chain 23. Now once we have our chain, we're going to connect it into our outside corner front panel strap. So all we're going to do is insert our hook into that top corner stitch and start with a single crochet. Now that single crochet is going to count as a connector, but it is going to count as our single crochets that we're going to work into the top of our strap as well. So single crochet into the top corner stitch, and from here continue with one single crochet into every stitch. Now I've just single crocheted across the top of my strap. Now in between my two front panel straps, I want just about 1 inch or 2 centimeters, so I'm going to make a chain of 6 right here. Once when I have my chain, I'm going to single crochet it into the top corner stitch of my other front panel strap. Again, that's going to count as a stitch, but also as how we're going to connect it, and work our way across the top of our strap with one single crochet into every stitch. Now from here, we're going to make the same chain that we made when we went from our back panel to our front panel. So for me, that's going to be a chain 23, and then single crochet it into the top outside corner stitch of the back panel strap. Now I'm going to make sure that my chain isn't twisted, single crochet it into this top corner stitch, then single crochet into every stitch, working our way across. Then, just to connect our two back panel straps, we're going to make the same chain that we made in between our front panel straps. So for me, that was 6. Now once when this single crochet row is completed, we are going to want to try on our piece just to make sure that this neckline can fit over our head. If it's a little bit too tight, go ahead and add some extra chains, or if it's too loose, go ahead and take away some chains, and then I'll meet you back. So now that our chain is complete and everything fits nicely, we're going to want to do a single crochet row. So chain 1, and working in the same direction as our previous row, just put one single crochet into every chain and stitch. Then once when this single crochet row is completed, slip stitch into that chain space. Now this single crochet row is going to be as wide as this portion can stretch. So once when it's done, try your piece on, making sure that everything still fits. Again, if it's too tight, reduce some stitches with a looser grip, or if it's too loose, reduce some stitches with a tighter grip. We are back. Our single crochet row is complete. Now from here, we're going to do our mock neck. So right after we slip stitch into that chain space, we're all going to make a chain the length that we'd like for the mock neck to be. Now you can make this as long or as short as you'd like. I'd like for mine to be just about 2 inches or 5 centimeters. So I'm going to start by making a chain 10. Then it's just going to be back loop slip stitch rows the same exact way that we did the underarm portion, connecting it into the base the same way. So go ahead and get that completed, and I'll meet you guys back so we can seam it up together. We are back, and I have just completed the entirety of my mock neck. I don't have any more stitches left to work into, so I did go ahead and seam everything up. Now this seam is going to be done exactly the same way as our side seam, which is an outside loop slip stitch seam. So just make sure your work is flipped right side out, right side up. Do your outside loop slip stitch seam, then do a chain up one and cut. Then we can get started on the bottom band. So inserting your hook into any one of the side rows along the bottom of our piece, what we're going to do is put 2 single crochets into every side half double and 1 single crochet into every side slip stitch row, making our way all the way around. Then I'll meet you back to get started on the length of our band. But really quickly, this single crochet row is going to be as wide as this portion can stretch. So go ahead and try this on once when it's completed, making sure that it's not too tight. If it is, redo some stitches with a looser grip, or if it's too loose, redo some stitches with a tighter grip. We've made our way all the way around with our single crochet row. Everything is fitting nicely, so now from here we're just going to do more back loop slip stitch rows for the bottom band. So right after we've slip stitched into that chain space, we're all going to make a chain the length that we'd like for the bottom band to be. I like for mine to be 2 inches or 5 centimeters, so again, for my bottom band, I'm going to be making a chain 10. Then we're just going to do our back loop slip stitch rows, connecting it into the base the same way that we did for the underarm and also now for the mock neck. Once we don't have any more stitches left to work into, I'll meet you back to seam it up. We are back. We have just made our way all the way around with our back loop slip stitch rows. We don't have any more stitches left to work into, so now the last thing we're going to do is seam it together. Now this seam is going to be the same as the mock neck and for the sides, so another outside loop slip stitch seam, so I'll let you guys do that on your own. Then once we have that completed, the last thing we're going to do is just single crochet along our armholes and along our neckline and our back. As you guys can see, I've already gotten mine completed, so I'm just going to talk you guys through it because it's super duper simple. Now, talking about our armholes first, all we're going to do is insert our hook into that next available stitch that we have into the base of our mock neck, then working down our armhole and back up, just put 1 single crochet into every side row, then slip stitch into that next stitch into the base. And we're going to do that for both armholes. Then for the neckline slash back, it's going to be done pretty much the same way. Insert your hook into that next available stitch into the neckline, 1 single crochet into every side slip stitch row, then once we're working down into the front slash back panel, 2 single crochet into every side half double, 1 single crochet into every side slip, and when we're working into the beginning of this, we did do a chain 2 along the top, so we should have just 2 stitches to work into the top as well. So just 1 single crochet into each of those. Just make your way all the way around, slip stitch into that next stitch into the base, repeat for the back panel, and then we are all done. The last thing we're going to have to do is just weave in all of our ends. And there you have it. Hope y'all enjoy the tutorial. Join us on Instagram, Pinterest, or Twitter. Those links are down below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Catch you on the next one. Bye.